By 1807, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the very peak of his power. From Lisbon to Warsaw, the map of Europe was painted in French colors. He had crushed Austria, humbled Prussia, and forced Russia to ally with him. No general in history had conquered so much, so quickly. But one enemy still stood beyond his reach: Britain. Britain's navy ruled the seas. Its trade route spanned the globe, from India to the Americas. While Napoleon's armies dominated the land, British gold financed every coalition that opposed him. He realized that to defeat Britain, he wouldn't need cannons, he needed to destroy its economy. Thus was born the Continental System, an ambitious plan to blockade Britain out of Europe. In November 1806, Napoleon issued the Berlin Decree, declaring the British Isles under blockade. All trade and correspondence with Britain were forbidden. No ship that had touched British ports could enter continental harbors. A year later, the Milan Decree expanded the ban even further. Any neutral ship cooperating with Britain would be seized by French forces. The goal was clear: starve British commerce, cripple its industry, and force London to sue for peace. Napoleon called it a war of paper and tariffs, but its stakes were no less deadly than any battle. At first, the plan seemed brilliant. With France controlling most of Europe, few could resist his orders. Ports from Hamburg to Venice, Lisbon to Danzig, closed their gates to British goods. Factories in France and its allies began to flourish, protected from competition. Smugglers, spies, and merchants now fought in a new kind of war, one measured not in territory, but in profits. Yet the system's greatest weakness was its scale. Europe's economy depended on British trade, on coal, cotton, sugar, and colonial goods that France couldn't replace. Prices rose, shortages spread, and resentment grew. Merchants went bankrupt, and black markets exploded across the continent. The French customs police tried to enforce the blockade, but corruption and bribery ran deep. Even Napoleon's allies, Holland, Denmark, and Spain, secretly traded with the enemy. And far to the east, Russia, his most important ally after the Treaty of Tilsit, began to question the cost of this alliance. To maintain his dominance, Napoleon turned to dynastic rule. He placed his family on the thrones of Europe. His brother Joseph Bonaparte as King of Spain, Louis Bonaparte as King of Holland, Jerome Bonaparte as King of Westphalia, his stepson Eugene de Beauharnais as Viceroy of Italy. He called it a family of kings, a European order built on loyalty to him. But loyalty built on fear rarely lasts. The first cracks appeared in Spain. In 1808, Napoleon forced the Spanish king to abdicate and installed his brother Joseph as monarch. The Spanish people rebelled almost immediately. Guerrilla fighters, the guerrilleros, waged a brutal, irregular war against French occupation. Ambushes, assassinations, and reprisals turned Spain into a nightmare for Napoleon's troops. The Peninsular War, as it came to be known, would drain hundreds of thousands of French soldiers over the next 6 years. For the first time, Napoleon faced an enemy he couldn't outmaneuver, a war of attrition fought not on open fields, but in mountain villages and city streets. Spain became the empire's bleeding wound. Meanwhile, the blockade was faltering. Smuggling through Portugal flourished, aided by Britain's navy. In response, Napoleon ordered the invasion of Portugal, and soon after, full occupation of Spain. But this only deepened the chaos. Across Europe, resentment of French rule spread. Napoleon's reforms had brought equality and progress, but also taxes, censorship, and endless conscription. Millions of young men were sent to fight wars in lands they'd never seen, for a cause they barely understood. In Austria, revolt simmered again. In 1809, Austria launched a surprise attack while Napoleon was bogged down in Spain. The War of the Fifth Coalition had begun. Napoleon responded with his usual speed, defeating the Austrians at Wagram after a brutal campaign that cost over 70,000 lives. The victory restored his dominance, but at a cost. For the first time, his aura of invincibility began to fade. Seeking to cement his power through diplomacy, Napoleon turned to marriage. His union with Josephine had produced no heir, and he needed legitimacy equal to the monarchs he defeated. In 1810, he divorced Josephine and married Archduchess Marie-Louise of Austria, niece of the executed Marie Antoinette. It was the ultimate symbol of his transformation, the revolutionary general now joined by blood to Europe's ancient aristocracy. A year later, a son was born, Napoleon II, whom he proudly titled King of Rome. The dynasty seemed secure, and the empire at its height. France stretched from the Pyrenees to the Polish border, its flags flying over Italy, Germany, and the Low Countries. Napoleon's armies numbered over 2 million men. No ruler since Charlemagne had controlled so much of Europe. And yet, beneath the splendor, the empire was cracking. The Continental System had become a burden, not a weapon. Britain, far from collapsing, adapted. Its merchants found new markets in the Americas and Asia, while industrial production surged. Instead of ruining Britain, the blockade strangled Napoleon's own allies. The turning point came in Russia. Tsar Alexander I, once Napoleon's partner in Tilsit, grew tired of French dominance and the economic ruin caused by the blockade. He reopened Russian ports to British trade in defiance of Napoleon's decrees. Napoleon saw it as betrayal, a personal insult. To him, any challenge had to be crushed, no matter the cost. He began to plan an invasion, one greater than any Europe had ever seen. An army of over 600,000 soldiers, drawn from across his empire, was assembled for a single purpose, to punish Russia and force it back into submission. But such a campaign would stretch his power to the breaking point. His supply lines would be impossibly long, his enemies waiting for their chance to strike. Even some of his marshals warned him, "Sire, this war could destroy everything we have built." Napoleon dismissed them. He believed his will was destiny, and that fortune favored the bold. By 1812, the Emperor of the French had conquered nations, rewritten laws, and reshaped the continent. But he was about to face a new kind of enemy, not a king or a coalition, but the vastness of nature, distance, and time. The empire that once seemed invincible was about to march into the snows of Russia. And there, Napoleon would discover that no man, no matter how brilliant, could command the elements or the endurance of history itself.